How's it going, everyone? Today we have a story of one of the cringiest Gen Z kids of all time. Basically, this Gen Z kid takes an IQ test, believes that he's genuinely a genius, and then starts to berate everyone else. And then he does a whole host of some of the craziest things you have ever heard. So sit back, relax, subscribe if you're new, leave a like on the video to claim your free nothing, and let's jump right into it. So we're going to call the subscriber who submitted today's story James. Anyways, right, James is a freshman in high school, and in his class, there's a kid who we're going to call the Gen Z kid. And when I say Gen Z kid, I don't mean someone literally in Gen Z. It's kind of just a term given to people that spend all of their life on TikTok, that, cancel people on Twitter, that just do a lot of dumb stuff like that. Everyone, it doesn't mean just because you're in a certain generation, just to be clear. Anyways, though, this story all starts one day when the Gen Z kid does one of those IQ tests you find online. So if you don't know, you can actually get like a official IQ test, and an IQ test is only so good for certain things. It'll figure out pretty good how good you are at solving problems, but intelligence has a bajillion factors in it, and you can't just take one test and really decide how smart you are just based off of that. And also, those online tests, a lot of them are BS and made up. And a lot of them are just trying to get you to click so that you'll watch the advertisements on their website. Anyways, though, so sure enough, one day in class, the Gen Z kid clicks on one of these, it's just on TikTok, and gets one of those TikTok ad whatever things for how smart are you really, whatever, right? So the Gen Z kid clicks on the IQ test and proceeds to take it. The thing is, though, that none of the other that the subscriber James and all the other people in the Gen Z kids class was aware of was that the Gen Z kid literally just put in the answers randomly. It was a pretty fake IQ test. It was 10 questions, right? It was 10 questions long. So an actual IQ test would probably have a lot more questions. The questions would be a lot more difficult. But even though this was only 10 questions long and the questions were probably just oh, is this the color red? And then it shows the color red. The Gen Z kids still completely randomly guessed these questions, which would be revealed later on to James, the subscriber, and everyone else. But basically, after spamming in these questions, hitting submit on the IQ test, it came back with 10 out of 10 questions answered correctly, which is actually statistically pretty impressive to get them all randomly correct. Maybe this website just told you everything was correct anyways, and labeled them with the score of intellectual genius level IQ, or whatever you want to say. So look, the Gen Z kid who believes everything that they see on TikTok anyways, imagine they see an IQ test calling them an actual genius. So one, do you think that the Gen Z kid believes that, okay, well, I took an IQ test, right? And I put in the answers randomly, and it was a sketchy website that I found on TikTok. Maybe, just maybe, I'm not actually a genius. Or two, do you believe that the Gen Z kid, saw the site, it said genius, and believes I'm actually smarter than Einstein. I am actually a genius. I am the smartest man on planet Earth, and I will let everyone know and berate them because they are not as highly intelligent as I am, or I see myself to be. If you guys answered the first one, well then, you're a good person, you think the best in everyone else, but if you guys answered the second one, you might be a bit more cynical, but you are correct. Sure enough, the Gen Z kid, right, they see this, right? They see this result that they did so well on this IQ test, and they immediately light up, right? Because now they've always thought they're always a little narcissistic, right? It's a lot of TikTok, a lot of Gen Z just tend to be a little bit narcissistic. I mean, it's kind of the environment that we put ourselves in. But now it's it's all been justified in this kid's head. Oh my God, I actually am a genius. I actually am the smartest man on planet Earth. I need to let everyone else know. So this is where the subscriber, who we're calling James, really starts to play a role in the story. So a little later in class, James, they're put into groups. The very beginning was 10 minutes of lecture or whatever, and that's when the Gen Z kid basically put their, did the IQ test, right? And then about 10 minutes after, their teacher's all right, we're going to put you in random groups. And James, the subscriber, was grouped up with the Gen Z kid. So basically, they go into a group. And, James, the subscriber, it's a very basic project or whatever, but it was a math class. So they were all right, class, we just learned this new topic yesterday. I went over it today earlier, and now try and solve this problem in groups. So in the group, the Gen Z kid, James, and two other kids sit down, and immediately the Gen Z kid is Hi, like, I just want to let you know that I should be leading this problem because I'm actually a genius. And so everyone kind of looks at him, and like James looks at him, everyone kind of gives him this really weird look because I don't know about you, but just going around calling yourself a genius is kind of a weird thing to do. So yeah, the Gen Z kid is like, yeah, I don't want any of you simpletons ruining this problem for me. Which, like, bro, what do you mean ruining this problem for me? Like, if they get the wrong answer, it's not even a big deal. This isn't like graded. This is just the teacher's just putting people into groups so that, you know, if people don't understand it as well, they might be able to lean on their classmates, and maybe two classmates that almost understand it are able to put their brains together to come up with the right solution. Not that it's graded and that everyone else who isn't a quote unquote genius like the Gen Z kid believes that he is going to suffer some sort of, like, I don't know, consequence because, like, they mess it up or whatever. So, yeah, it's pretty strange. So, basically, right, the kids in the group were like, okay, bro, like, whatever. James, the subscriber, also kind of didn't care because James is like, okay, well, it's not like I want to do this math problem. It's pretty early in the morning. I don't totally know what's going on. So, yeah, not actually a huge deal that, you know, the Gen Z kid is like, oh, I gotta be like, I don't know, I gotta make sure that, you know, I do the problem because you guys are gonna mess it up or whatever. Like, it's just genuinely not that big of a deal. So sure enough, you know, the Gen Z kid starts to, like, hack away the problem or whatever, right? And completely messes it up because it's not like the Gen Z kid has ever been paying attention in class because they're preoccupied with their studies in TikTok usage, bro. And you know who the one person in their study is? Themselves. So yeah, sure enough, the Gen Z kid says, oh yeah, the answer is going to be 28. And the funny thing too, like, this was a type of math problem where there was, like, the answer wasn't just purely a number. It was like y equals 48 plus 10x or something like that. So when the Gen Z kid just says, oh, the answer is 28, like, I think someone in the group, it wasn't James, but it was someone else in the group, was like, hey man, the answer has to be y equals mx. It has to be in, like, y equals mx plus b format. And the Gen Z kid's like, are you questioning my genius authority? Do you really think that a genius like me would mess up a problem like this? And, well, yeah, I guess, because you're wrong, bro. But anyways, yeah, so the kid in the group that wasn't the subscriber was like, okay. Like, I don't know, man. It's like, you don't really want to fight these people. You don't really want to, like, you know, yeah, they can be ignorant, they can be annoying, but also because they're both ignorant and annoying, like, what's the point? Genuinely, what's the point in fighting these people to try and convince them that they're wrong when they are so full of themselves and truly believe that they are always, no matter what, in the right? Yeah. So, sure enough, eventually the teacher's like, okay, well, guys, like, I've given you 10 minutes to do this problem. That should be ample enough time. If you didn't finish it, don't worry about it. You know, this wasn't graded or anything. Let me go over the solution on the board. So the Gen Z kid is sitting in their chair, super smug, super like, oh yes, I already know the answer because my genius intellect solved it in 0.1 milliseconds, when in reality, I think they just, you know, pulled a random answer out of their butt and assumed, since they are a self-proclaimed genius, that it must be correct. So, yeah, the teacher goes on the board, solves the problem, and the answer is like y equals 2 plus 48x. I don't know, something like that. It is not in the form, it's not the answer the Gen Z kid gave, but it's not even in the right form, right? It's a completely different format. So the Gen Z kid raises their hand, and the teacher, you know, expecting questions as this is new material, is like, hey, like, Gen Z kid, like, what's up? And the Gen Z kid is like, teacher, I believe you made a mistake. And, you know, everyone looks at him like, okay. Because, look, here's the thing. Teachers sometimes make mistakes. Actually, all the time, they make mistakes when they're writing on the board. However, most of the time, they're kind of like clerical errors. They're really small errors that don't really matter, but it's good to correct them just in case a kid gets confused. For example, in math class, and I take some pretty hard, you know, calc series, linear algebra, discrete math, stuff like I've taken some pretty difficult math classes. The teachers are always almost right with the topics that they're teaching, but sometimes they'll, like, add 25 and, like, 14 wrong together. Like, sometimes they'll just add two numbers wrong together on the board, and someone will politely raise their hand, point it out, and then the teacher's like, oh, yeah, my fault. Apparently, when you're, like, teaching or whatever, you can do those, like, small math mistakes that just happen a lot more often. And it's a good idea to point those out so that people that are, like, barely following don't put down, like, because they're going to write down what's written on the board verbatim and then probably read back and try and understand it. Making the small corrections can actually help out a lot. However, it is a totally different thing when a student raises their hand and basically accuses the teacher of being wrong with the base material. This can happen, and I've seen it happen before, but it's a lot more rare, and obviously in the Gen Z kids case, no, the teacher's right on this. So the teacher's like, oh, did I like add something wrong? Which is a fair response because the teacher knows that they're doing it fundamentally correctly, but, you know, is open to the fact that they might have made addition, like little mistakes like that. They're very open to the fact that they might have made those mistakes. But the Gen Z kid is like, well, actually, teacher, the answer is 28. And the teacher looks at him and is like, 28 what? Because remember, I think this was like solving a linear equation or something. So it's like you need it to be in y equals mx plus b form, or I don't know, you could have a few more formats, but you can't just have like 28. That's not an answer that works at all in any situation. Yeah, so the Gen Z kid then goes on to explain that the teacher has done the entire problem wrong and that the answer is actually 28. The teacher fires back saying that no, they did not do the entire answer wrong, as the answer can't just be 28 by itself. It needs to be associated. First of all, it needs to be y equals format, and that also this was not a flat line, so it wasn't going to be y equals 28 or something like that. The teacher says it has to have an x component because it's like, you know, it's a function. It's not just it's not, you're just solving for one thing. It's like, it's a function, right? So sure enough, the Gen Z kid, since they believe that they are actually a genius, says, well, actually, I don't know that you should be fighting with me because I recently did an IQ test and it scored me as an actual genius. So the whole class kind of looks at the Gen Z kid. I think some of them thought that the Gen Z kid actually like did really take an IQ test and did really get like, I don't know, 140, 120, I don't know, something really good. And some of them were like, whoa, because remember, freshman high school, who even knows? Other kids were pretty skeptical. Some of them thought that the Gen Z kid was flat out lying. Others thought that they were wildly exaggerating and something along those lines. So the teacher's like, well, okay, I don't know that much about IQ tests. I also don't really know, how much that has to do with anything, because I can tell you that what you did was incorrect. That's not how you answer this. You might have the largest IQ in the world, but this is math and this is how it's done. And I'm sure I'm going to get some like PhD math student from Stanford in the comments going, well, actually, there are multiple dimensions, dude. Okay, for the sake of this video, no, right? For the sake of this video, what I say goes. Anyways, so the Gen Z kid is like, well, you shouldn't fight with someone with such a high IQ, like Mr. Whatever. Like, you should really just bow down and accept what I say, because you know what? I'm probably right. And I think the teacher was just having a bad day, because I think in most cases, this teacher, and probably other teachers in most cases, would just, like, chalk this up to a kid being a little jerk, being like a little twerp or whatever, and just kind of ignore it and move on, be like, haha, funny, whatever, and just kind of ignore it. Maybe some teachers would, like, penalize the kid, but this teacher decides to go full savage mode. Bro actually decides that, he's like, all right, well then, let's actually see. So the teacher's like, all right, so did you do an IQ test online? And the kid's like, yeah. So the teacher like goes into Google, types up IQ test, and pulls up an IQ test. And the teacher's like, you know what? We're going to solve this debate. Whoever gets a higher score is right. Which is completely crazy. Like, I don't fully side with the teacher on this one either. Yeah, so I don't know. I can't really get behind the teacher on this. I think it's pretty immature, but I think the teacher was just genuinely having a bad day. And also, the teacher was kind of risking something. Since these IQ tests, a lot of them are kind of like problem-based like puzzles or whatever, and there's a decent chance that the teacher is genuinely much better at mathematics, but just happens to score less on this IQ test. And then he really did put up like, oh, if you score higher than me, then you're actually correct. But the whole class is kind of like getting really interested because they would never expect their teacher to say something like this. So the Gen Z kid's like, fine, okay, let's do it. And yeah, basically what happens next is the teacher and the Gen Z kid both do the IQ tests, and then the results are shown live in front of the whole class. Completely ridiculous. But in the meantime, I'd like you to, 1 second, comment down below IQ test. In the comment section down below, that'll be the secret word of the day. And while you're in the comment section, make sure to check out the pinned comment, as there is a link to my Spotify page in which I upload these stories as podcasts on there, as well as a link to 2 other channels which I post on daily. Please subscribe to both of them to help me out. Anyways, let's get back to it. And of course, leave a like in the video to claim your free nothing. Of course, man. You already know. So yeah, sure enough, the teacher pulls it up, and I think the Gen Z kid was probably quaking a little bit in their boots. Like, they were probably a little bit nervous for this. this, but they were putting up a front. They were putting up this look of like, oh yeah, I totally know what's going on right now. Like, I'm not even worried since I'm actually a genius, right? So sure enough, the teacher pulls up an IQ test. Probably just one that they got from online. And once again, I do need to point out that there are probably some errors in this method of, approaching this problem, right? There's definitely better ways to go about this. And I don't think looking online and looking up IQ test and then after doing so, just like, I don't know, I don't think that's the best way to go about it. Not the best method to approach this. However, I will also say that who cares? This is pretty funny. So the teacher pulls up an IQ test and basically goes on the kid's laptop and says to one of the students, hey, make sure he doesn't cheat, like watch him. Because I don't know, I think the Gen Z kid probably would have like typed up every question into Google or whatever and just needed someone to monitor. So the teacher goes behind their desk and starts taking the test and instructs the Gen Z kid to take the test as well. There was like 30 questions, which is once again kind of ridiculous that the teacher decided to use class time to do their little, basically dunk it on this kid in front of everyone, which is kind of a waste of time, but a funny story nonetheless. So I'll continue with it. But sure enough, the Gen Z kid starts, typing up their answers. So, anyways, guess who the kid who's instructed to watch the Gen Z kid is? Yes, James, the subscriber. So James watches as the Gen Z kid opens up the IQ test, and it's timed, so they're supposed to take about 20 minutes to do it, and goes through the questions and clicks randomly. Once again, the Gen Z kid finishes within 3 minutes. That Gen Z kid is like, done. And the teacher's like, okay, if you really don't want to use that time, go ahead. I think for a second, maybe a split mere millisecond, the teacher was a little bit concerned, thinking, oh my God, wait, is this kid actually a genius? Like, maybe I am wrong. However, the kid was not a genius. The kid just put in random answers. And James kind of looks at his classmates with a look of like, what? To kind of signal that the Gen Z kid was doing something a little strange, which he was. He was just putting in random answers and, he did get I don't know, I guess he got what he wanted, so maybe it wasn't too strange. But, so sure enough, eventually the teacher's done too. And the teacher's like, okay, don't hit submit yet, give me your computer. And so the Gen Z kid hands over the computer to the teacher. The teacher, puts both computers, on the screen or whatever, and hits, submit on both of them. And the teacher has a little smirk on their face, kind of indicating that the teacher is somewhat happy with the result of this IQ test, which, however you see, that's however you see it. Anyways, right, so sure enough, the teacher continues to be like, all right, well, as I said, I will screen share the results to everyone, and we can finally come to a conclusion on who is correct. Which, once again, there's a lot of issues with the way that the teacher went about this, I'm not going to lie. And also, an IQ test will not show who's correct, as, the Gen Z kid could have potentially randomly guessed perfectly for 30 out of 30 questions. That is very, 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 very statistically unlikely, and I think the teacher was kind of aware of that, but you could kind of tell that the teacher was kind of rubbing it in the Gen Z's face without even showing the score yet, as the teacher was like, well, I'm glad we did this so you guys can really, for once and for all, know if you can trust me or not. Because at this point, the teacher knows the results of both the tests. So yeah, sure enough, the teacher shows the first test result. And the IQ test is the first result from when the teacher did the IQ test. And I think the teacher got a above average score. Teacher didn't score in as a genius or whatever, but it says, congratulations, we estimate, remember, the online tests are pretty BS, so take this with a grain of salt. But, we estimate your IQ is 115 or whatever you are in the 80th percentile. I took that out of my butt. That might be completely wrong, but it's probably close to being correct. Anyways, and the teacher's like, okay, well, that's my result. Let's see what the result of the Gen Z kid is. So now the teacher screen shares the computer of the Gen Z kid and reveals the results. The results say, you scored a 60 IQ, you are profoundly stupid, or something like that. And you scored in the bottom 10% of people. We don't know how you're functioning in society with an IQ like that. Good luck getting a job. Okay, I don't think it said all of that, but that was basically what it's implying. So the Gen Z kid, I don't think actually deserved a score like that, but remember, they randomly chose all 30 answers. So in the first time, randomly choosing got them a genius score on their IQ test. But in the second time, it got them a lowest possible score possible, because guess what? When there are 4 to 5 answers per question and there's 30 questions and you guess randomly on each question, the odds of you doing well are just so incredibly low. If you guys are stats majors and want to give me the exact answer in the comments, you can. I'm not doing that in my head. I barely remember. I took stats a while ago. It's been a second. Also, I think we did that in discrete math, but it's been a second. So yeah, the Gen Z kid's reaction to this is just pure silence. Because the Gen Z kid you can't come back from this, basically. The Gen Z kid might be like, oh, you messed with the results. But then James, the subscriber, would be like, nope, he did not mess with the results. Or the Gen Z kid could be like, oh, this way of doing it is stupid. And then, they'd be asked, okay, well, then how did you determine that you were a genius? And the Gen Z kid would have to be like, an online test, right? So the Gen Z kid was just silent, basically admitting defeat. The teacher's like, well, then, we can proceed with class because of this whole debacle has been solved and finished.